in San Francisco, you see Waymos driving around, and it breaks your brain because there's no one driving the car.
We build the future that we want to see. It's going to be like the Jetsons a little bit.
A 2-3 mil FTV low cap token, and once it started ripping, I think it went to 30-40 mil within 6 days.
Each car is going to have their own wallet inside of the car. In the late 2024, AI agents tokens have a market cap of around $5 billion. January 2025, it hit $20 billion. There are so many cool things happening in the space. And, I met Jack, in Singapore a few weeks ago. We started talking, we started brainstorming, and we came up, okay, man, his narrative of, Web3 is going to a path that is very exciting. My name is Daniel. I've been building DePIN Hub and Hotspot for the past 5 years. I'm like a deep tech nerd, and I can see that the technology, the Web3 is going through, we're getting to a part that is very exciting for me, which is AI plus robotics. And when I started talking to Jack, we sat down, okay, man, we have to sit down and talk about this. There's so many cool things happening in this ecosystem. There's so much to learn still and so many things to develop that we said, okay, let's just start a podcast. Let's just see how this goes, right? Thank you, Jack, for being my partner in this, the first episode. So we're just trying to tag along, see what happens. No expectation there, but I think we're going to have a great time. So with that in mind, let's get started. Maybe you introduce yourself and then our first guest.
Perfect. Well, I'm Jack. I run a fund called Pylon Partners. We do a lot of liquid investing. We're big fans of this AI robotics category. Our first guest is Sammy. Sammy is to me, a token whisperer. Sammy has built his reputation over the last few years, starting off with NFTs. More recently, has become a very much trusted voice on this AI and robotics and just broader crypto intersection. So Sammy's joining us for this first episode. And I actually think for the first topic as a group, I think we've seen a bunch of interesting narratives. Robotics in the last quarter has gone off significantly. I think also now X42 is a huge topic. So Sammy, welcome. Would love to actually kick off and hear your thoughts on X42. And you recently published a piece as well today. And so love to hear your view on what's happening.
Pleasure to have you guys. My name's Sammy. I have been kind of in crypto for a number of years now, but more recently pushing at the intersect of crypto and AI. So I think for me personally, it's looking at those two emerging techs and how they kind of commingle that's the most interesting place to be. And I think with robotics, that's the next iteration of physical AI. So I think that there's a number of connecting points that we're probably going to touch on throughout this podcast. You touched on the X402. I can go into a little bit more detail there, but ultimately what it is it's an agentic payment standard. So it makes it possible for agents to make micropayments for various things, whether it's compute, API calls, all these different types of things that agents would need to operate fully autonomously on chain. And I think that's the biggest thing for me, where you're looking at agents that are exploding in the traditional AI sense. So you've got all these big tech firms that are building them out, like creating optimal workflows for people to plug into these agents. But I think the permissionless aspect of people using these agents on chain is something that's yet to be seen. And I think there's various tools that you can use to analyze pure agentic volume and things like that. So scattering is something that I came across recently. And that's it shows all this fully autonomous trading volume that by protocol to see which infra projects are kind of capitalizing the most on this agentic boom. And I think that then leads into probably a number of other areas that I think are going to be even more exciting. And you both touched on robotics, and I think that's going to be the next iteration. So,
yeah, one thing that I would like to say, I think it's just a missed opportunity because it should be called X420, not for X402. But, that's not me, because the 402 actually is an HTTP protocol it's been existing for many, many years. And finally, there's a use case for that, right? And I was researching the protocol, and I think there's a lot of people have been talking about that alongside the agentic world, but it can be any kind of payment as well, right? I could make a little website that, I want to sell NFTs, I want to sell my car, and it can actually have a X402 like protocol on the website that people can pay for it as well.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, essentially all it is it just enables agents to interact with the real world. So something else that popped off probably in the first half of the year was Model Context Protocol, which is that enables agents to plug into real world data and use that and interact with it. This is specifically a payments model context protocol, so MCP. And that just basically enables agents to make payments. And X402 isn't the only standard. There's plenty of other standards that they could use, but I think ultimately you're going to have two or three that are going to become the status quo, like what most of these agents are going to end up using. And as with any industry, I think you're going to have a critical mass within a couple of these that will end up being the leaders. And I think X402 being backed by Coinbase and kind of Cloudflare influence, I think is probably a pretty good bet to go into.
Because I think not too long ago, there's one, I think it was called AP2. It's like a payment protocol developed by Google. And it was by Google, and they didn't have enough like support from the crypto community, like Coinbase, right? I think that's the key thing that was missing on that to make it super standard. And also 402 is just something that every browser can do. It's quite straightforward in terms also the HTTP stack.
Just in terms of the history, though, I think that's something that's super interesting. And you touched on it being like the 402 standard back in the day. But I mean, this was created back in 1999. So you're looking at 26 years ago. But they finally created with blockchain, they've created this payment solution that plugs into that. And I think that as a geek, that's pretty interesting. It's kind of like the next iteration of the internet. And I think, who was it? The founder of Circle came out, was it yesterday, and mentioned about these different epics. And I think the fourth epic, so you've got the internet, I think you have the social aspect of the internet, and then you have the ownership of the internet, which is the decentralized aspect and blockchain. And more recently, you've now got the agentic internet. And I think that to me is, okay, well, if you've got these big wigs at the head of these massive institutions making comments around this is going to be the future, I think people need to start paying attention. I think you've got Visa and MasterCard are obviously pushing into agentic payments. You've got Tether creating their wallet development kit, which is meant for trillions of users. And of course, those users aren't all going to be human because there's only 8 or 9 billion users in the world. So most of those users are going to be agentic. So you've got all these infrastructure build outs from these massive corporations with huge war chests. I just don't think it's going to be going away. And I think it's just, you need to pay attention to these trends that are happening.
So I know that it was one of the Coinbase employees a few months ago published a paper on X402. So why was it, when it first released, no one really talked about it? And why is it so hyped in the last 7 days?
I mean, the long and short is, I can only guess why that is, but I think the A16Z released their State of Crypto report, that the AI section of that report was specifically around like payments. And they called out X402, included Coinbase, and also highlighted that they're expecting to see, I can't remember who they quoted, but it was like 30 trillion of autonomous payments by 2030. So like you can imagine that's going to grab some headlines, and I think people then start looking into it. I think there's a lot of discussions, especially in the venture side of things, around, okay, well, what's the next hot topic? People are obviously betting on AI, but payments, using X402 and also neobanks and stable coins seem to be something that people come back to. And I think that specifically recently you've had Plasma, you've got sort of Tria, you've got all these neobanks coming to market that I think that it's just like a eureka moment. So, okay, well, what payment protocol are they going to use? Okay, Coinbase seems to be the one that's pushing it. Okay, well, everyone just kind of comes to that conclusion at a similar time, and then people start posting about it, and then it just gets a lot of traction. So I think back in the day, sort of March time, which I think is when it came out, I think everyone was so saturated with information about AI agents, like chasing the next shiny thing. This kind of got brushed under the carpet. But when the dust settles, you kind of come back to it. And it's like, okay, well, what are things that are actually going to change the game? And I think that people are just realizing that now. So,
and then there was a record time for CoinGecko to start their X402 category. And then we saw Pay AI. I think this goes to show how quickly crypto moves. Pay AI, I think, went from, it was a 2-3 mil FDV low cap token, and once it started ripping, I think it went to 30-40 mil within 6 days. And so, I mean, the ticker's great, Pay AI. And so this is right token, right time, I guess. The KOLs started writing reports on X402, and then Ansem retweeted one and put Pay AI in there, and it just went wildfire. A bit of a retrace now, but these categories can just come and go so quickly. I mean, this time last year, around the November-December time period, virtuals was sitting at 5-6 mil, went up to 30-40, retraced a little bit. I don't know. I'm not going to make the same comparison that we're going to see this as. I think many people are touting what the next iteration of these agents, instead of like Twitter profiles there, it's what, agentic commerce. What's the tagline now, Sammy? Agentic commerce is the right one, right?
Yeah, no, it is. I think that's, I mean, specifically around virtuals, you've got Agent Commerce Protocol, so ACP, and that is specifically agents to agents transactions. It's been something they've been developing in the background for ever since they were incepted, I think, or at least until December last year, with their butler and all these agents they're bringing in to kind of build out their own verticals. Like having a society of agents carrying out tasks just makes sense. They had their Genesis launch. They had the initial launch back in sort of November, December, and you saw like Ai-XBT birthed, you saw like Luna, you saw that run, and then more recently you saw some other ones that had sort of teams with certain specialism and skills coming through, and people made a lot of money off that because they got in early. But then that hype kind of faded a little bit, and this is something that they're kind of building out, and I think now's the right time where you've got even Tom Lee talking about virtual specifically and writing ideas about alt season and what AI is the next big thing, and obviously with X402 popping off and virtuals integrated there, I think that has some upside. But I do think that you got to be careful. Like there's a lot of hype and speculation around X402 and protocols integrating that and the people buying that, but ultimately X402 is just an open standard that agents and projects can plug into to enable agents to transact. So you want to be looking at, okay, well, what are they going to be the main protocols or projects that are going to be benefiting from agent to agent transactions? And I think it's going to be those that are either selling products that agents want to buy, so whether that's compute APIs or subscriptions to certain information that they need, or it's going to be those that capitalize on the transaction volume, so taking fees. And maybe it's your Geezers, your Almanacs, your yield seekers, like these that are doing the DeFi side of things, and they're taking fees from these agents autonomously, maximizing yield, or whether it's like real world products that they're selling. And maybe it's companies outside of crypto that are going to see the benefits of these agents in crypto, then using crypto to buy these products. So it's quite hard to work out what those are going to be, but you can kind of brainstorm as to what they might be and then allocate weighting to it.
Yeah, that's actually quite interesting. I think we were discussing a little bit before I started recording the podcast is that I think the key point there is that you mentioned is that X402 is a protocol that has nothing to do with token, crypto, anything like that. It's just like, besides, of course, a DeFi payment rail. And for people who get excited, it's definitely a lot of opportunities on all these tokens that are coming out of the market, but make sure to do your own research. Like this podcast is not financial advice in any form, but there's a lot of hype. When there's hype, there's people trying to, profit out of that. So make sure that you invest in good projects that you believe in. I usually try to do that looking by projects that have some sort of utility, otherwise just speculation, which happens at every hype and cycle.
Yeah, we saw Creator Bid integrated with X402, and then any agent token which said they were integrating with X402 got a pump. It was so funny.
But it's quite dangerous, right? Like I'm more like a grumpy old man sometimes when it comes to crypto. I've been around crypto for 14 years. I've been a lot of things during my time. And I'm always like, okay, show me utility, show me try to do this. Unless it's just a meme coin that I'm going to try to make some money or play the casino, right?
That for me specifically, though, like the whole meme coin era, I mean, I'm a fundamentals guy as well. Like I like to see revenues, and maybe it's because I'm ex-TradFi, so that's what I'm used to. And I'm like, okay, well, this is a viable business. Crazy to think that we've finally come around to that, okay, crypto products have to make revenue to be sustainable. But ultimately, I think that's kind of the direction we're going now. That I mean, a year ago or 2 years ago with meme coins, like that seemed to be people just wanting to speculate and gamble. Like that's always going to be the case, but you're gonna, like, at least if you speculate and gamble on products that have fundamental value, then at least there's a floor as to how much they're going to go down by, or you'd hope so. Whereas meme coins, they can literally just go to zero because it's all attention driven, and that to me is far riskier than kind of getting an understanding of what the underlying product is and what they're trying to sell. So I'm with you on that. Like I think I'm just thankful that we've come back to utility.
So the bull thesis for X42 is one of these protocols, if it's Virtuals or whoever integrates with X42, the bull case would be if a bunch of users were started to deploy agents that were transacting with each other, or a solo dev created an agent that was suddenly underpinning like a bunch of different business use cases. What's the bear thesis here? So is this overhyped? Are we like, it's an open source protocol, so is there any economic value here for a token?
I mean, you ultimately you want adoption, right? So the bear thesis is no one adopts it, and it's just agents transact with each other, but they don't transact with each other for any real value. Like, and that's where you need that connection to the real world. Like, what are these agents doing? Are they actually, do they save me money? Do they save me time, or do they make me money, or do they entertain me? Like, what's their core value? Because you have some agentic products that are purely entertainment, like the video ones, right? I mean, there was probably some value there if it's creating an advert that then gets people to buy a product, but does it make me money through DeFi? Does it save the amount of time it takes to carry out some sort of workflow task, and therefore that has some value. So it's trying to figure out, okay, well, what are these agents going to be doing? Are they going to be using that payment protocol to then complete a task that saves time or makes me money, or does something that creates some sort of value? And I guess the risk is that they don't do that, and then we don't make any money, and that kind of just continues to trend downwards. But you'd like to think that there is, like with crypto being permissionless, like it's probably going to be easier for agents to transact on chain globally for probably cheaper than having to KYC through traditional banking systems and get access to cards and be able to plug into like your Amazons and stuff online to make those payments. But this kind of comes into the neobanking argument as well. Like, I think it'd be pretty easy to give these agents virtual cards, put some crypto on them, and then they can go off and carry out tasks based on what their agent has been trained to do. And I think that's a huge value proposition. And you've got teams of agents now, whether it's through Virtuals, whether it's through BitTensor, whether it's through any third-party protocol or separate ones, that they could do something that creates value. And that's kind of what I'm looking to do. So looking to seek out like what agents are actually creating value, or what teams of agents are actually creating value.
I even like to think like one step ahead as well, because I've traveling around the world. Every country has its own private payment. Like you go to China, there's like Alipay. If you go to Singapore, there's some in Thailand, the QR code pay. Imagine in the real world, you're gonna have a way that you can actually do the same thing as people are doing locally, but for anyone, like without actually barriers or countries in this sense. You can just have a QR code that you can pay. That's another use case, I believe, for this protocol. I think that could be interesting. You go to get a pad thai on the street, and then you actually just scan something that pays in crypto that has the whole thing for the entire world. And I think another topic that is very exciting to me is robotics. I think the more and more we're going to get robotics around you, and this actually can be the protocol, the payment protocol, hopefully, that things are going to transact. As an example, there's a company called Robo AI that each car is going to have their own wallet inside of the car, right? So basically what you can do is just you park your car. You don't need to care about paying for parking. Anything that you do around your car can be automatically paid for, tolls or whatever, just because your car has a wallet and has microtransactions embedded in it, and X42 can be that. I think we're going to see more and more different use cases as well.
And I think even with humanoid robots, I agree. I mean, for the robo taxis and for your car, definitely. But even like you think about, I mean, you can use Plasma One or Tria as an example, where you get a virtual card that you can store on them, but then you get the physical card that is embedded somehow, whether it's on their wrist or whatever. So they can go out and say, for instance, you've got, I mean, it's probably going to be a simplistic way of doing this, and this is very crude, but say your fridge is kind of empty, there's no food, and you've got a smart fridge and it identifies that. Maybe it tells the robot, the humanoid robot, to go to the shops to go and get some food to bring it back. Realistically, what's going to happen is it's just going to order online and get it delivered, but then the humanoid robot picks it all up and puts it in the fridge. So I think there's going to be basic things that we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years that are going to become normal. And I've seen videos in Shenzhen of like the drones dropping off deliveries at various points and people going collecting them, and you've got the exoskeletons where you can put those on around the waist and you can obviously run at a faster pace than you can when you're a human just without the support. So I think there's going to be a lot more of that happens, and I think people are going to be surprised at how quickly it happens.
I think all eyes are on mid next year, the Unitree IPO. I mean, I have friends now who are making trips down to Hangzhou to go see the Unitree CFO to try to get some pre-allocation to their stock. And so it's giving me metaverse vibes. Instead of the metaverse, where it's like fully virtual, it's like human robots roaming the streets. Yeah, Shenzhen is... I was just there last week, and the amount of dogs that were just roaming around, they were... So in San Francisco, you see Waymos driving around, and it breaks your brain because there's no one driving the car. It's scary when you see dogs on the street and they're just roaming. And so...
To clarify, it's robot dogs, right?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Scary.
Still scary. Still scary.
One of them had red eyes. It was like in the middle of the night, and I saw... Yeah, I got spooked.
Yeah, I think it's coming. I mean, when we were in Korea a few weeks ago during the Korea Blockchain Week, that was like Korea has a bunch of these little cars delivering food. Singapore as well. Like it's gonna become normal. You know, something that was like from a Black Mirror episode or like in a Futurama or something is gonna become reality pretty soon. And thanks to the Web3 backend, I think that's gonna help a lot.
Even so, on the robotics side, you saw yesterday, 1X, they revealed their robots and that went viral. And I think like you've got, but what I found interesting was there's a mode that you then, because it will carry out simple tasks, but when it struggles with more complex tasks, you then organize to have a teleoperator. So you've got some dude from somewhere else just like plugged in, controlling it remotely in the house to train it. I don't know, that feels a little bit creepy, and that feels a little bit dystopian to have someone else like walking around inside your home. But you could quite easily see that become the norm, and actually people forget that that's some random person on the other end doing it. Or maybe you just banish it from going into certain rooms, whether it's the bedroom, toilet and stuff like that, so it doesn't just rock up and see you. But yeah, I think that's going to become super normal in the next 2 to 5 years as well.
Yeah, I saw that. I thought it was a bit creepy indeed. Like I don't want someone watching me. And you don't know, like when imagine they just take over without telling anyone. This kind of things happen all the time, right? But I agree with your point that this also is just a mental constraint a lot of times, and we're definitely going to evolve into this becoming norm. The same way that we don't think there's a place without internet. When I was a kid, I remember going home after school to get online. And now it's like everywhere. You don't do anything without internet nowadays.
But also the I don't know if were you around when you had the dial-up, so you had the sound on the phone. Yeah. So you literally couldn't use the internet with someone like your parents wanting to use the phone as well. So that to me is like, okay, well that was like, I remember that, but I guess the next generation aren't going to remember that. They'll just be like, internet's always existed.
Human butlers are going to exist everywhere. Everyone's going to have like a robot butler instead.
Only $500 a month, like it doesn't seem that much. Like if you think about the amount of time saved, maybe they'll start looking after your kids, like keep cleaning them and stuff like that, and you've got nanny savings, and you could then create content out of it, and you're making money, so it becomes a revenue generating machine as opposed to just a depreciating asset. It's definitely becoming affordable.
My point of view on this is they have to go quite accessible in the first pricing of their robots so consumers receive it well. I think a lot of these companies today are subsidized by venture, obviously chasing returns. And so how sustainable over the long term are these robotics companies? It's a supply and demand question. Today, supply can be subsidized by a lot of the billions in venture, just like every tech shift is the same. And so in this case, in the short term, what's going to happen is over the next 18 months, a boatload of robotics companies are going to get funded. They're going to come from Apple, OpenAI, and the Chinese. A lot of them are going to fight for market share. What is a real demand of the technology? Are we advanced enough on a software versus hardware level for this to actually be useful in the home? I think a lot of people expect it to be earlier. I suspect humans overestimate how advanced we're becoming, and so we will expect it to be usable in the home. It's kind of like the same thing with green energy in the early 2000s. It's the same with AI. It's like, although then you think about ChatGPT and you're like, wow, that was a expectation did meet reality. Actually, in that case, I don't think anyone even had expectations on the power of ChatGPT. It was, we had to prove to them, just launch it. And that magical moment they actually did reach. But again, it's this expectation versus reality that, especially in financial markets, is kind of overstated. I think we like to crowd around big ideas and we're like, oh, that's going to be huge. It's a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. And so it attracts like a certain entrepreneur. And those entrepreneurs are attracted by the capital versus the actual technology. And so I'm pretty cautious on a lot of these things. Although in a retail-driven bull market, retail likes things that they understand. There's nothing more compelling than a sci-fi novel of robots replacing humans. So
I think as well, like there's something to it being physical. If people can see it, then they're more receptive to it. I think a lot of the crypto blockchain stuff, people see these tokens and the chart going up, and that's great for advertising, but ultimately they don't really understand what's going on behind the scenes. And I think with the robotics side of things, like you need to get a lot of these robots in people's homes to do all these tasks so that they can train them on that data, because I agree with you, they're probably not going to be that useful early on, but they don't have enough like visual multimodal data that they can then train robots effectively about doing those simplistic tasks. And I think we've even seen over the past year like a paradigm shift in how effective these robots have been around like spatial awareness, and like they can kind of react to the environment a bit better and they're a bit more nimble, and I think that's going to change. And I think even, was it last week, you saw Amazon roll out video glasses to all its delivery drivers so that it can get more visual data, which ultimately is probably going to be to drive like data sets for these models. So I think it's going to change at an exponential rate once you get those robots in people's homes.
There's a pretty cool project out there. I don't know, it's in your guys' radar. It's called Mawari. They're building this DePIN project to is basically the infrastructure layer for augmented reality streaming, right? Because they've been building a tech for the past, I think it was around 7-8 years. They built think about the MP3 codec for augmented reality streaming, and they realized that they wouldn't be able to actually implement the infrastructure if it was just on AWS servers, which they can probably go down as well, like recently. So they're building a really interesting technology in terms of, okay, how can we distribute the processing power to do augmented reality? And I think this also goes very well with what we're talking about, right? Augmented reality glasses, robotics, AI, crypto, everything's going to be merging. And I think we are in the right time on focusing on this. There's a lot of things that are still coming up, right? Like it's going to have a lot of scams along the way. But the idea is that on the long term, we build the future that we want to see. And I think it's going to be like the Jetsons a little bit. It's coming to be more like that. I don't know, those who are old like me that used to watch the Jetsons when kid. And yeah, I'm really excited about how everything's merging to Web3. I said once I had an interview on the DePIN podcast with Amira it's the head of DePIN on the Solana Foundation, and we came to the conclusion that DePIN or what we're building is basically the same thing as web scraping, but for the real world, right? So basically, like this robot training, like there's so many camera projects, and it's a cool, I think, take on it. And the more in AI needs a lot of data to do what's coming up.
And I think there's a bunch of hardware DePIN products which are trying to solve this robotics training and data ingestion type problem. What's your read on some of these projects? Are any of them legit? You've met a lot of these founders.
Yes, I mean, there's a lot of good projects out there. I think, for example, Hive Mapper is one of the oldest DePIN out there. I think managed to map, I don't know, 30% of the whole streets around the world. They're doing like Google Street View kind of camera. And that's a lot of data. They can already train a lot of models in terms of, okay, potholes or detection or whatever they're doing. They're not very transparent on the clients they're selling this data for, to the data to. There's also projects like Rover that they have you install like a little lidar on top of your car. As you drive, it maps everywhere you're going. So there's a lot of different projects trying to, in different way, extract data of real world data. There's another one called Frodobots that had a little robot that you could actually drive around from your computer, deliver like a pad thai to someone on the different country. But all the data, all the driving they're doing on the pavement, etc., it's collecting that information to drive. And then there's so many, right? Like Silencio, for example, they're detecting. Initially, it was just noise levels. Now, actually, they're detecting what's happening around them. So they wanted to become the microphone of the real world, basically train data, like knowing where you are in the world, what kind of information is happening, and train that. So there's so many different projects.
That specifically to me is super interesting because you kind of most people will skim over the audio element of robots and kind of the data that they need to be able to interact in like a normal environment. Whereas like we take that for granted because we were born with it, and we just get used to that environment. But if you think about like an artificial being, like we've got to train it all from scratch, and having projects that are specific to audio or specific to visual or specific to even touch, like that is ultimately how you're going to push robotics forward.
And we definitely need, I think, Web3 for that. I think that's like the perfect use case for DePIN. This kind of like bootstrapping this network, getting a lot of people to collect data, whatever kind of data it is, and then pay these people back in a token that hopefully gonna go up.
A lot of these DePIN projects, I mean, aside from 2020 and 2021, it's a lot of these DePIN projects really haven't performed well on a token perspective, which is so disappointing when a lot of the data is very valuable. For them, they need to, I agree with you, there's like a supply side problem, which is, okay, we just need user contribution, they need to be incentivized. A lot of the big problems with most of these DePIN is they don't know how to commercialize it. And so my worry is that there's a lot of projects which you just have a lot of data, and what do you do with it? I think the game theory from a lot of these founders is they say, we collect the data, and once we have it, we'll figure out what to do with it, which does not sound like a very ample business plan. And now you see, again, I think it was 2 months ago, where Simon from Moonrock wanted CoinGecko to have a robotics category. Once our robotics category came out, we had a bunch of DePIN projects sort of reposition themselves as robotics first businesses, which we found quite interesting. I think you had a few trade with the robotics bid. I think GeoNet was pretty good. I remember around this time last year was the peak TGE, and I spoke to a lot of their investors before they TGE'd, and Peak has been around since 2018. They have partnerships in Germany, in particular with some of the OEM car manufacturers, but it was written off because it was just a DePIN L1. They had great financing, but DePIN just wasn't hot. And then when the robotics category essentially came out, they became the de facto leader of the whole robotics category. It's just funny how, I guess the key is, guys, to play in a category that CoinGecko is about to launch a list in. I think that's the best way to catch a bid. I don't know what you think about this, Sammy.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of it is right time. And I think you just need to wait for that catalyst. I think people seeing the potential for robotics in the real world, and actually some of them getting a bit of traction, it means that, okay, well, I guess it transcends in Web3 as well. So what adjacent verticals are going to do well alongside that? And I think obviously DePINs, it's physical infrastructure. I think those networks are obviously going to be very valuable. And I think ultimately we've seen progress in the past year or two since like ChatGPT around like AI models improving, which is effectively going to be the brains that go into these physical robots. And I think that people are starting to connect the dots and be like, okay, well, this timeline is accelerating a lot quicker than what we originally anticipated. If you've gone back to when ChatGPT launched, what was it, 2022? Everyone was like going to be, oh, okay, by the end of 2023, robots are going to be going around. So I think to your earlier point, we kind of overestimated the shorter time frame, but now we're sort of 3 to 4 years on. I think we're starting to see, actually, we could see robots, humanoid robots in homes as soon as like a year's time, like effectively doing tasks, not just there as like I don't know, like a glorified trophy. So I think that to me is super interesting. I think just seeing people kind of jump on that narrative, because that's what people are looking for. And I think it becomes an attention vacuum, and anything that isn't that narrative then gets pushed to one side. And we see that in crypto specifically, because I think you see something pop off, whether it's prediction markets recently and everything else around that just kind of is suppressed a little bit, and it's not being talked about in the timeline. And I think we go through those hype cycles, and I think it's perfectly natural. And we probably will see this AI bubble. And I think one of those points around, I think, was it the infrastructure cost or the upfront investment? It's going to take these AI companies years to recoup those costs in terms of revenues. I think that's probably scared a few people. But ultimately, I think that if you then build out the infrastructure to hit a lot more adjacent verticals in the real world, then they could probably monetize a lot more, make a lot more money, become a lot more viable in terms of a business, rather than being heavily subsidized by governments or people not necessarily seeing the ROI in the short to medium term.
On the infrastructure side, Daniel, I know that Aether announced their digital asset treasury. Can you run us through what the announcement was?
Yeah, Aether, I would say, is a company that's been playing the crypto game very well as well, right? So they had this idea that they started as a gaming infrastructure, and then the AI boom started. I think it was the first node sale that actually did very well. With that money, they started implementing. For what Mark says, Mark is one of the co-founders of Aether. They're focusing a lot on BD, on sales and onboarding new clients, and I think that's something that's very, very important. And the latest thing that happened to them is like they're implementing their own DAT, digital asset treasury. For those out there, I released a podcast interviewing him on the DePIN Hub podcast. So you can go deepinhub.io and check the podcast. What he explains, everything that's happening, why is it exciting. I think it's going to be like pretty much one of the first, or if not the first, DAT around DePIN or around infrastructure tokens. I'm very curious to see how this thing's going to play out, because I've seen more and more projects doing that as well. I think a big one is Helium. Helium just announced their own DAT, I think, a few days ago. So those projects that have a massive bag, let's say, they have enough capital, they have enough, enough energy to really grow. I see a lot of them actually trying to focus on the DATs. I'm very curious to see, like I said before, how this is going to play out. Hopefully, it's going to be, like a cycle that's going to go up and up. I just don't know how the DT is going to perform if we get into the bear market. That's my curiosity. I don't know what you guys think about that.
I don't know. I think it depends what the underlying reasoning or how it's being structured. I think because we saw recently one of the ETH DATs sort of sell 40 million to do a share buyback. So yes, we see like these institutions accumulating the underlying crypto assets, but it could quite easily spin the other way when they decide to kind of protect their MNAV or whatever it is, so like the multiples above their net asset value. And I think that we haven't necessarily seen that on a broader scale. And also, I don't know how it works in terms of if you have locked tokens, can you put those into DATs as a way of founders kind of exiting their positions at an earlier stage, effectively creating like a liquidity event? And I think those things you're gonna have people that manipulate it and try and capitalize on it, and then you're gonna have genuine DATs that are being structured for good reasons. So I think it's just trying to work out which ones are good DATs and which ones kind of have an ulterior motive.
Yeah, that's a good topic, good idea, because I could imagine, let's say a founder has a bunch of tokens and he sells that to the DAT and receives shares of that DAT back, and then he can sell that, right, to make some profit.
That's exactly what's happening. This is Grift City happening right now. This marketplace is perfect. This intersection of Web 2 versus Web 3, because there's Web 3 projects who want to grift and want to sell their coins early and try to get liquidity, and there's so many low cap equity in the NASDAQ, on primarily in the US, but across the board, being out here in Asia, there's a few Bitcoin treasuries in Hong Kong, Thailand, in Korea there's one. Metaplanet in Japan is obviously one of the top ones who have done the strategy for a while. The game theory is perfect, which is, oh, I can sell my tokens and I can quote unquote onboard Web2 investors to my token. It's fantastic. Get more liquidity. And so I expect every token to have a DAT eventually. It's great for what these token treasuries are doing, are reviving dead companies. And so they're going and approaching someone who essentially has had a shell company on the US stock exchange for the last 10 years, doesn't know what to do with it because it's trading at 10 mil and no one really wants it. And now they found a buyer for that useless equity. They get to exit and have upside in the potential growth on top of this new token. It's perfect. I think Near 2 days ago also launched their DAT as well. And so I think 3 months ago when the ETH DATs were getting announced, the Solana DATs were getting announced, today you're seeing all of these altcoins now announcing their DATs. And so the ones that got announced right now, I assure you that over the next few months, there's going to be a lot more. Every altcoin in the top 500 by FTV is working on one or is about to announce one. It's amazing. This is how you found incremental buyers. These guys are going to be the guys who revive the bull market, guys. Well, that's what the DAC people say.
Do you, just on that bull market point, do you see we had Coinbase acquire Echo recently, and you've got the Clarity Act going through, and I guess regulations kind of improving for tokens, and maybe that connector between equity and tokens, which we're kind of seeing through DATs and acquiring the underlying crypto assets, but maybe a more simple solution where you've got equity literally tied to tokens. So there's that connector that could happen in the next 6 to 12 months. And do you think we're going to see that ICO season through the likes of launchpads for Echo, which whatever they end up rebranding for under Coinbase? Do you think companies are now priming ready for that?
Yeah, I think what happens is private markets follow public markets. And so as public market valuations go higher, the expected value of these private companies get higher. And so as public tokens reach $5 to $10 billion, the implied valuation of a private company gets higher because you can exit at 5 to 10 bill. Hey, my comparable company in this category is trading at multi-bills. Hey, I'm just doing this round at 100 mil, man. It's all good. What was the Mega ETH raise? How much at this? Was it FDV, Sammy?
I think it's $6 billion, but the raise is still going.
Still going right now.
The implied FDV was a lot higher, I think, because they'd raised so much, and it's still open till tomorrow.
What usually happens is as public FDVs get higher and we approach a larger bull market, private valuations get higher, and so founders need to value extract earlier. Because what happens is if you think that public markets are increasingly getting more frothy, the amount of time that that you can extract when it's in the public markets gets lower, because it's clear that you're approaching the bull market. As you approach it, the amount of time that you can stay at the high valuation gets lower. And so you actually need to start ICOing. You'll see private round valuations get higher as well because people want to extract earlier. Back in 2021, we saw at the peak of the gaming market, games fundraising at a pre-market val of 200, 300 mil FDV. Back then, Axie was trading at 18, 19 billion. IMX was trading at 18, 19 bill. And so it makes sense that I can do a private round at 200 when my comparable is trading at 100x. And so I think a lot of the bear thesis is this time is different, which means, which could be driven by the fact that retail might not be buying the long tail of tokens anymore. So what I mean by that is the inflows this cycle are ones of structured institutional capital, which is there's just a lot of like structured pension funds and these endowments, and they want to buy quality. And so what you'll see is the incremental dollar coming in, 80-90% of it is looking to buy AVAX versus insert AI token number 50. And so liquidity structure is really important. And so if a low cap token which is trading at 250 mil and is trading $1 million a day, I can't, as a fund manager, buy $100 million of that token in the next few days because there's just not enough liquidity for it. And so I'm not a buyer of that belief. I think that a lot of the early inflows since 2024 have been institutional led, but when retail really comes in, we still think that retail, my assumption in 2017 and in 2021 was that when retail comes in, they get smarter and they buy more sophisticated things with more fundamentals. What you find is that retail just buys like shit and then buys worse things. They actually don't get smarter, they get dumber because they're chasing, they're gambling. And so this next bull market, we think, in 2017, it was like clearly this was retail euphoria. In 2021, it was like less clear because there was at least more structured products. We had options be used more. And so there was like more sophisticated liquidity. And so the percentage of institutional capital or smarter money was a bit higher and had a longer time horizon. I think this time around, it's even more long time horizon investors, which are allocated towards like strong fundamentals. And so you'll see things that print real revenue and real buybacks and real market value go higher. But also, the percentage is still going to be very high of retail money chasing meme coins. I mean, it was like Q2 in 2024 that we were talking about some of these meme coins by Murad. And so we don't think that goes away. The fact that XRP is pumping and Zcash and like all this old Dino coins are pumping also shows that a lot of these flows aren't really logical. These are 2017 buyers and the 2021 buyers who are coming in and buying more. And so a lot of pattern matching has to be done. Well, how about let's cut it there. Sammy, thank you so much for joining us. So where can people follow you, Sammy?
So I've got my newsletter, which is Sammy. I mean, that's literally my link to the link in my bio. So follow my Twitter handle, which is S4MMYETH, and then you'll see the Substack link as well. But that goes out every Tuesday to, I think it's about 7,000 subscribers now. Or just like I posted all of my thoughts that are on X as well. So either or. Pleasure having me.
Sammy, the token and AI whisperer. That's my nickname.
It's better than I got called AI Jesus in the first half of this year. I think that was a little bit too much.
You're gonna make a comeback.
Well, maybe Robo Jesus. I quite like the. I think the Kaito leaderboard just got posted, and I'm taking up 40% of the mind share. So
Robo Jesus. Oh my god, this is excellent.
Thanks everyone who's listening, and catch you up on the next episode. Rock and roll, guys. Thanks so much for joining.
Pleasure.
That
Thanks,
was
guys.
amazing.